6:29, good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Angela.
And I'm sitting in, just to let you know, for Anne, who is taking a well-earned break for a couple of weeks. She will be back.
I spoke to Anne yesterday.
Oh, is she okay?
Yes, she's all fine. She's very chilled.
Yes.
So that's very nice.
Oh, good.
Good on her.
There you are. She'll be back in a couple of weeks' time. Right, it's time for us to take a look at the front pages and indeed the stories in the papers today. We've got the Times reporting that Chancellor Jeremy Hunt wants to boost the British economy by proposing tax cuts for businesses.
And the Mail says Mr Hunt is also considering raising the £1 million lifetime allowance on tax-free pension savings.
The Guardian says the BBC chairman and 20 Tory donors are among thousands who own UK property through offshore jurisdictions.
The Eye has poll results suggesting growing public concern about the impact Brexit is having on the economy.
And the Telegraph leads with a photo of two masked people in a bath taken in the home of Epstein's ex-girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yes.
A very funny photograph. It's a bit odd.
Very odd.
It's a bit odd, that one.
Yes, we'll explain what that's about in just a minute, because we're joined by political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield, and journalist and author Ella Whelan. Lovely to see you both this morning.
Morning.
Kevin, can we start with the Times and what the Chancellor has been telling us?
Yes, so Jeremy Hunt was out and about yesterday. His first real major speech since he became Chancellor late last year, talking about how he's going to turn around the economy, etc. But he's also given an interview to the Times. So they've got an exclusive line saying that he's going to prioritise tax cuts for businesses. Now, him and Rishi Sunak are under huge pressure from a lot of Tory MPs who want to cut taxes as quickly as possible. The budget coming up in March. But what they're talking about is taxes for you and me, income taxes, things like that. People that taxes that individuals will notice straight away. But he's saying, no, we can't afford to do that. The priority is getting business, boost the business, that'll boost the economy, which is, there's a definite economic logic to that. But I just wonder how that's going to go down with Tory MPs who I say, want to go on the doorstep and tell people at the local elections in May, we're going to cut your taxes.
What is interesting, I looked up yesterday the fact that Geoffrey Howe, who was Thatcher's Chancellor, he did exactly the same. When again the economy was on its knees and everybody at the same time sort of vilified him for that decision. But a couple of years later, everybody saw that he was absolutely justified taking that line. So I wonder whether or not Hunt is trying to sort of, take a page out of Geoffrey Howe's book and prove that this is the way to get the economy back again.
Well, perhaps, and they certainly need something to turn things around, because we'll come on to this polling story later on, that at the moment, any short honeymoon or polling boost that Rishi Sunak got when he became Prime Minister has evaporated, and the Tories are still miles behind Labour. So they need something quickly, really quickly actually, to come along to turn around that situation. So maybe this might be it, but as I say, I just think a lot of Tory MPs are going to be like, actually,
I just wonder, because what's interesting is we're going to hear from Keir Starmer today, and one of the lines we understand he's going to be pushing is people before party. Now, you could argue with this, couldn't Jeremy Hunt say, well, actually, I'm putting country before party with this policy, and if Tory MPs want me to announce tax cuts that they can promote on the doorstep, well, that's actually putting party before country. Yeah,
well, exactly. And they can also, a lot of them do, they point to the evidence of what happened in the mini-budget, if you remember that, back in, when was it, October now, that put a bomb under Liz Truss's premiership, announced all these big tax cuts, and the markets went haywire, and it ended her premiership like that. So they're saying, well, look, we've tried it, it didn't work, so we're going to be a bit more sensible, a bit more cautious. We want to cut taxes, but only when it's affordable. Which, as I say, is economically logical, but politically, I think it might be a bit of a gamble.
May not be the message people want at the moment.
It's also the case that, a bit like, part of the problem with Truss, one of the problems with Truss's plan for the economy was this suggestion that all you have to do is cut taxes and cut red tape, and that businesses will come swarming, and that the capitalist class are really keen to set up new factories, to do new things, to be adventurous. And that we can see that isn't the case. In actual fact, you have businesses that are very cagey about investing, want to kind of, in one way for understandable reasons, in another way kind of sluggishness, is that they don't want to invest in any kind of new technology. So it is a gamble, because you don't necessarily have the capital and the sort of the know-how within the business community to jump into the space that Hunt thinks he's trying to create. But on the front page of the Mail and across some of the other papers, it focuses on Hunt's desire to, as he says, get us back into work, and particularly focusing on the over 50s and trying to address this issue that we have, that post-pandemic lots of people, I think quite reasonably, looked at the subpar job that they were doing, knackered, getting home from work every day, and thought, actually, life is too short. I'm going to jack this in. And so Hunt's plan to try and get those people to get back into the workplace hinges on, as you were talking with your political analyst earlier, about raising the £1 million lifetime allowance on tax-free pension savings. But also there's this in the Mail, it goes into detail, this kind of sort of G-ing up atmosphere, like kind of narrative of, you were saying putting country before party. He's sort of asking people to kind of do their bit to get back to work, but without any mention of, as many commentators have said, pretty much ignoring the kind of public pay dispute at the moment going on with strikes, not offering a huge amount in terms of saying we'll have competitive wage rates or anything like that. There's, we keep hearing, and this is something I'm interested in, having just had a baby, about, the government's plans, or that they're having discussions about childcare, but there's no content in relation to that. And we know that most people, particularly if you have 2 kids, it's far more expensive to be in full-time employment than it isn't. And so there's no kind of meat on the bone. So basically it sounds like he's saying to people, kind of with a whip, get back into work, but with no real incentive as to why you would do that.
Except he has promised them this tax, looking at the tax on their pensions, hasn't he? And I suppose that is the only little sweetener in this whole proposal.
And it is only a little sweetener, because the other side of things is that there is.
Who's going to have £1 million pension?
Exactly.
Yeah.
and there's the other side of this, which is that, we talk about full employment, or the idea of going back into work, but actually the quality of that work, a huge amount of the way in which we discuss levels of employment now hinges on the fact that lots of jobs are crap. They're crap hours, the conditions are bad, they're 0 hours, or there's the fact that, endless things like delivery drivers and stuff like that, where your quality of working life is pretty poor. You don't have that old kind of belief in, or traditional belief in, sort of a stable job that lasts you for ages, that you move up through the ranks. And I think that trying to entice people who are in the middle of their life and 50-something to go into a kind of poor condition, poor rate job is just, why would you do it? I mean,
there was talk. One idea they had was, if you're over 50 and you come back into the jobs market, you won't have to pay income tax for a year. That was obviously that's been rejected. It's probably too expensive. But I think the danger there, though, is that at the moment a lot of younger voters are thinking, well, hang on a minute, all these things are geared towards the older generation, while we are struggling to get on the housing ladder. Childcare, as you mentioned earlier, is extortionate. So what are you doing for us? So then it creates this sort of a generational divide.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a tricky one for the government, for sure.
Yeah.
It is. Now, Kevin, in the eye, I'm always fascinated by this. The Eye's talking about Brexit regret is growing. So, all these polls about this, I don't hear it out and about. I've got to be honest.
No, so it's a bit split. It's difficult to read it, actually. So a lot of the areas, so they've asked people, the pollsters have asked them, like, what do you think Brexit's meant for the economy, cost of living, etc., etc. And by and large, people are sceptical, to put it mildly, think it's not been great. But when you ask, well, would you vote to rejoin, it just shows that the country is still massively split. 51-49 in favour of rejoining. That's within the margin of error. That's tiny. That's after all this bad negative headlines. So I think people, by and large, think, it's not been great for whatever reason.
We wouldn't be in a better position now if we were still.
Well, we just don't know, do we? And also the hassle of rejoining. I think a lot of people have looked at the chaos and the disruption that leaving has caused politically, economically, etc. And they think, maybe instinctively going back might be a good idea, but I don't want to go through all that hassle again. And also, rejoining would mean having to accept the single currency. We wouldn't have the rebate. You know, we're not going to go back in on. There's no way the EU are going to say, just come back in. We'll forget all this has happened. They're not going to. They're going to drive a really hard bargain.
But we don't even know they want us.
Well, exactly. So you know, that's exactly. So if you want to come back, we're going to make it really tough.
Difficult.
So that is, I think people realise that as well. So you know, I think if you're a Remainer or a Leaver, there's a lot you can take out of this that will back up what you already think, which I think is where the country is as well, because there's another interesting element of it, is that nearly 1 in 10 Leave supporters back reversing Brexit. Well, nearly 1 in 10, that's not very many. So it just shows that people who voted to leave, still over 90% of them still think it was the right thing to do.
Do we need to stop doing these polls? I mean, in the sense that we are out now, so why revisit this?
We're not going to go back in.
We're not going to go back in.
So just get on with the situation in which we find ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, it makes for a good story on a Saturday in a paper, and it fills a page. Exactly. But it's good for journalism that you have these polls. But in actual fact, I think, I think the one thing it shows is that people, by and large, haven't really changed their minds that much when it comes to the straightforward binary question of, do you want to be in or out?
Yeah. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's almost kind of rigged for Brexit voters, because what's happened is that you take a position in a referendum and you win that referendum, and then not only is there years of it being denied and all the rest of it that we know, but it's also completely. It's turned into nothingness and despair by a government. I mean, the government has completely mishandled Brexit. It's, the kind of way in which it's negotiated with the European Union has been, and this is not me sort of absolving the European Union at all, but the whole process of it has been messy, complicated in ways in which it didn't have to be. You could have had a government that could have taken different political decisions. I mean, it's important to note that the vast majority of MPs were anti-Brexit, Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, whatever. So this was it was kind of always from the start going to be a very, very painful process. And so then at the end of all those years, you have still some Remainers coming along and saying, we told you. And it's like, well, I mean, it's not my fault as, an individual voter that the people in power never wanted to implement my vote and then decided to do it badly. The principle of that vote still stands. And I think, that we can talk about trade, we can talk about, relationships with the European Union, particularly in Northern Ireland and stuff like that. All of that's important, but the fundamental point still stands, which is that in terms of democracy, we're better off now outside of the European Union. And the way in which it's handled the pandemic, the way in which it's handling democracy within its member states, whether it's Hungary or other places, I think more and more it's showing itself to be the undemocratic institution.
And we've sort of wasted the last 6 years, haven't we, by actually not accepting the situation that we're in, getting rid of, as actually Hunt wants to do, a lot of the EU regulations, and building on the decision to come out to create a different sort of political, economic and social landscape here in this country.
I think it also shows that the idea that referendums settle issues is for the birds.
No.
Yeah, it's the same in Scotland as well. Scotland had the independence referendum in 2014. And it still absolutely dominates the political debate up there. So so the idea that you can just, and everyone's just going to pack up who voted and were on the losing side.
And forget.
All right, fair enough. Let's just move on.
Doesn't happen that way.
Doesn't work that way.
You've taken a story from the Mirror, Ella, and I think that this will hit home with a lot of people. The oil giants preparing to announce profits of 160 billion as families are struggling to pay their utility bills?
Yes, BP, Shell, Chevron, ExxonMobil and Total Energies are all announcing eye-watering profits. I mean, I don't think this comes as much of a surprise to anyone, because we have been having discussions about the fact that oil companies and energy companies are basically getting rich off of a product of the crisis of the war in Ukraine and all the kind of the turmoil that's happened in terms of energy production after that has meant that it's been a very good year or two for oil companies. And there's, the Mirror goes into some of the solutions as to how you would kind of right this wrong, whether or not it's a bigger windfall tax. I mean, Jeremy Hunt's already upped it from 25% to 35% and extended it till 2028. There is discussions about whether or not we should take action like France did with EDF, whether you have a completely different system of producing energy in relation to national security. But I mean, it seems to me a bigger question, a bigger question is, linking it in with what's happening on a daily basis in this country, which is, for example, we've just had the National Grid demanding the flexibility service, paying people to turn off their electricity. One of the price is one thing, but also I'd say even a bigger issue is access to energy and energy production in this country, which isn't going to be fixed by taxing oil companies more, as much as it might make me, your blood kind of curdle looking at the profits.
Yeah.
Ella, Kevin, thank you both very much indeed. We're going to be hearing from you again in about an hour from now, but in